What's up, everybody? Joe White here, and today we are going to be diving into Level 1, Chapter 1 of Ready Player One. And I'm not going to be reading this like I did the prologue. I did take some notes here. Um, so we start off the book after the prologue. It's Level 1, Chapter 1, and there's a quote. And it says, "Being human totally sucks most of the time. Video games are the only thing that make life bearable." And this is from Anorak's Almanac, Chapter 1, verses 1 to 2. And it's crazy because the way this is printed in the book and the way you read it, it's like the Bible. It's quoting chapters and verses. Um, to my knowledge, no real, I've come across very few other books that are written like that. Besides the Bible, of course. So if you remember, they talk about Anorak's Almanac in the prologue. I believe they did. You'll find out quickly that this is a book that James Halliday left behind. Basically, it's his entire life in book form. It's his movies he watched, what day he watched them, how many times he watched those movies. Same goes for TV shows, books, video games, you name it. It's in the, if it has anything to do with James Halliday, it's documented in this book. Um, so Wade talks about, we get introduced to our main character. His name is Wade Watts, and we find out that his father named him Wade Watts because it sounded like a cool superhero alter ego. You got Clark Kent, Bruce Wayne, Wade Watts, Peter Parker. Um, so he's awoken by gunfire, and he says that that's not unusual, and that gunfire is actually quite common in this world because the world's pretty much gone to pot, except for the Oasis. Um, he talks about how he's playing Galaga and Defender and Asteroids on a laptop that he describes as being quite bulky. And he says these are hallowed games by Gunters. Like, these are like the holy grail when it comes to hunting for this Easter egg. He's sleeping in a bag. He's in a sleeping bag, excuse me, in the corner of the laundry room, and he's wedged into a gap between the wall and the dryer. So he's sleeping in the laundry room, and he talks about how he likes sleeping in the laundry room because it's not cat. He says it doesn't smell like cat piss and poverty, and it makes me wonder, what does poverty smell like? And then it hit me while I was reading this that I grew up poor, living in mobile homes for most of my life, just like Wade does. So I can identify with this. Um, when you have a cat or any animal in a mobile home and their stench gets all over the place, there's no running away from it. And it reminds me of a few years back, we were on my way to my grandmother's funeral. Um, and I had picked up my brother, and we were on our way to the funeral, and we decided that we were going to go out to eat first. And where we went out to eat, we went to Cheesecake Factory. And where it was, they had a Yankee Candle store. And me and my brother, he talks about smelling like poverty. And it's like, me and my brother started asking the people inside the Yankee Candle store, do you have one that smells like being poor? Do you have one that smells like broken home? It's just outrageous things like that. Do you have one that smells like leather belts? We're used to that stuff like that. Um, and he talks about having 15 people in his aunt's trailer. Um, And it I can identify that because when I was young, my let me know if you guys can identify with any of these situations in the comments below. Um, when I was younger, my mother's second husband got put in jail. I believe it was for non-payment of child support to his ex-wife. But anyway, and my mother, we lost income, and we ended up moving into a one-bedroom apartment with another family of four. And then I believe at one point there was 10 of us sleeping in a one-bedroom apartment. The adults got the beds, and then us kids had to sleep on the floor. And then I think shout out to Chris Leary, if you're not the former WWE announcer Chris Leary, but you know who you are. Chris slept on the couch. He was like he was like that friend who had really nowhere else to go, but he liked playing video games with us kids. Um, in fact, my Sega Genesis when I was a kid stayed on for at least a week straight because we were trying to play Sword of Vermilion and the save feature in the cartridge didn't work. So the only way that we could save our game back then, boys and girls, because there were no memory cards. If the little battery save function inside the cartridge didn't work, you were screwed. So the only way that we could keep the game going was to leave the Genesis on for a straight week. And every day when we would get home from school during that week, and Chris would get home, he worked at Taco Bell. Um, every day when he got home from work and we got home from school, we would all, if I had homework to do, which I never did my homework. Anyway, we would all just immediately just rush to that TV that was in the bedroom, and all through the night, the evening, up until the adults wanted to go to bed and we had to go to bed, we played that game. So I could definitely identify with how Wade Watts is living here. Um, maybe not to this extent with the contest and everything, but I definitely know what it's like to want to do nothing but eat, sleep, and play video games. Um, so he powers on his laptop, and he, we find out here that he's also a smart geek. Um, he's able to fix things like laptops, and we'll soon see that he's able to hack into computers, and he's a very smart guy. And we find out how he's so smart here in just a minute, and it's all having to do with the Oasis. This Oasis's virtual reality world that Halliday created is responsible for everybody's upbringing. It's responsible for everything. We'll discuss that here in a minute. He's playing Robotron, and he says he's downloaded every movie, TV show, and cartoon that is in the almanac. So if it's mentioned in the almanac and it's played on the small screen, he's downloaded it. And he watches Family Ties of all things, and he dreams about living like Alex Keaton, Michael J. Fox's character in Family Ties. Um, give me 1 second here. I did want to read some parts of this. Let me see if I can pull up this paragraph and read this to you. All right, let's see here. He says, I'm going to go ahead and read this. I selected an episode of Family Ties, an 80s sitcom about a middle class family living in central Ohio. I downloaded the show because it had been one of Halliday's favorites. I figured there was a chance that some clue related to the hunt might be hidden in one of those episodes. I'd become addicted to the show and immediately I'd become addicted to the show immediately and had now watched all 180 episodes multiple times. I never seemed tired to get tired of them. I always found myself imagining that I lived in that warm, well lit house, and those smiling, understanding people were my family. That there was nothing that could go wrong in that world. That we couldn't sort out by the end of a single half-hour episode, or maybe a two-parter if it was really something serious. My own home life had never remotely resembled one depicted in Family Ties, which is probably why I love the show so much. I was the only child of two teenagers, both refugees, who met in the stacks where I grew up. So then he goes on to discuss his father. Um, we find out that his father was shot dead looting a grocery store during a power outage. So that's how crazy life has become um, there in the and this is in Oklahoma City. So you can imagine what as society starts to crumble, what it was like in the rest of the world. Um, so his mom, we never learn his father's name, and but we learned that his mom is Loretta. And after she was, we find out that she has two full-time jobs in the Oasis. That's where her work is, in the Oasis. She does not have to leave her house. She's never really, it's work, but it's not work. If anybody who worked from home knows, yes, you're sitting on your butt all day, but it is mentally challenging. And they're in Oasis jobs because in the Oasis, the currency there also can correspond to the real world. She's a telemarketer by day, and at nighttime, she's an escort in an online brothel. And he talks about how while she was working in the brothel, she would give him earplugs, but that the earplugs really didn't work. So he used to have to just take whatever TV show or movie he was watching and just turn it up real loud so he didn't hear his mother working in a brothel for a living. Um, so I put down here that his mother used the Oasis as a babysitter and that he was pretty much raised by the Oasis. Um, he would go on the Kid Planet and do VR Sesame Street, The Muppets, um, were his friends. Games taught him how to walk, talk, read, write, eat, count. Everything we take these things for granted today, but imagine having to learn how to walk from a VR program. I can't imagine that. I have babies in my family who, one of which I have a great nephew who is just born. And I cannot imagine teaching him how to walk or placing a virtual reality headset on him and logging him into these programs, a computer program, to teach him how to walk and talk and crawl and everything. He says, from the time he was born or able to put a headset on, his mother pretty much let him go free in the Oasis. Um, and I wanted to read another passage here. Give me 1 second, guys. All right, so this is very important, and this is where I'm going to discuss this again when we get to it, but and again, I don't want to mention the movie that much, but this is where the movie really gets the character wrong. Um, he says the worst thing about being a kid was that no one told me the truth about my situation. In fact, they did the exact opposite, and of course, I believed them because I was just a kid and didn't know. I mean, Christ, my brain hadn't even grown to full size yet. So how could I be expected to know when the adults were bullshitting me? So I swallowed all the Dark Ages nonsense they fed me. Some time passed. I grew up a little and gradually began to figure out pretty much everyone had been lying to me about pretty much everything since the moment I emerged from my mother's womb. This was an alarming revelation. Now remember, he's still he's a kid here. He's in high school, and this is the way that he's thinking. Um, and he says it gave him trust issues later in life. Um, it says basically down below. It's like basically, I wish someone had just said, "Here's the deal, Wade. You're something called a human being, that's really some kind of animal. Like every other animal on this planet, we're descended from a single celled organism that lived millions of years ago. This happened by a process called evolution, and you'll learn more about it later. But trust me, that's really how we all got here. There's proof of it everywhere, buried in the rocks. That story you heard about how we were all created by a super powerful dude named God who lives up in the sky? Total bullshit. The whole God thing is actually an ancient fairy tale that people have been telling one another for thousands of years. We made it all up, like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. Oh, and by the way, there's no Santa Claus or Easter Bunny. Also bullshit. Sorry, kid. Deal with it. You're probably wondering about what happened before you got here. An awful lot of stuff, actually. Once we evolved into human beings, things got pretty interesting. We figured out how to grow food and domesticate animals so we didn't have to waste all of our time hunting. Our tribes got bigger. We spread across the planet like an unstoppable virus. Then, after fighting a bunch of wars with each other over land resources and our made up gods, we eventually all got our tribes organized into a global civilization. But honestly, it wasn't all that organized or civilized, and we continued to fight a lot of wars with each other. We also figured out how to do science, which helped us develop technology. For a bunch of hairless apes, we managed to invent some pretty incredible things: computers, medicine, laser, microwave ovens, artificial hearts, atomic bombs. We even sent a few guys to the moon and brought them back. We also created a global communications network that let us all talk to each other all around the world, all the time. Pretty impressive, right? So, and then he goes on. So we have the ability, what struck me about this is it's a global economy. The Oasis is part of this global economy. And then he also, we clearly see Ernest Klein's thoughts on religion here. He's letting his own thoughts and his own ideology veer into the character here. And as it basically he learns that everything that we were told here in this century is a lie. Um, but the part about a global government and global civilization, and I found that very interesting here because of the way we'll soon see that the way this world operates, they don't care about anything but the Oasis. So he talks about the how the Oasis keeps him sane. And whenever he feels like the real world, he doesn't want to face the real world, him along with everybody else buries themselves in these headsets. The Oasis was his preschool, he says. Again, if you learn it, you learned it in the Oasis. There was no, we'll find out later, there are real world schools, but nobody wants to attend them. Um, he says that when his mother was not working, she would log in with him and they would play, and he never wanted to go out. They would log in, him and his mom would log in and play games with him, and he would show her around the virtual world and meet his friends, like, the Muppets and everything like that. Says that his mother was depressed all the time, so she did drugs to keep herself sane. And she says she died of a bad batch of something that was shot into her arm. Um, his aunt then takes him in, but we find out that the only reason why his aunt has taken him in is to um, get the extra food vouchers that come along with keeping him. And he has to find his own food by repairing and pawning electronics. That his aunt eats up all the food. Um, and at that time, his aunt comes in to check on something in the laundry. She sees the glow of the laptop and takes it from him. Um, in fact, we find out that he's a bit of a wuss in the real world right now because his aunt goes and gets her boyfriend to take the laptop from him, and he struggles at first, but when he raises an arm up at him, he quickly kowtows and gives up the laptop. And as the aunt and the boyfriend are walking away, they're quickly discussing how much they could get for the laptop and how much money they could get for it. but it's okay because he has two spare laptops in his hideout, and that's where he goes for school. Um, it's a van buried in the car heap that's the junkyard that sits next to the stacks, and it talks about him having to climb down. He was like, I think it said he was the 15th row or up. Yeah, he's the stacks are 15 mobile homes high, and I think it says he's like either 13 or 14. So he has to climb down these, mobile homes, and if that are stacked up on top of each other. He talks about Mrs. Gilmore, his neighbor. She offers him breakfast, but he says no. I got to get to school. So he goes to his hideout, which is inside an old van, like an old conversion van. And inside that van, he has like a treadmill that he uses and an exercise bike. And he pedals on the exercise bike to charge his heater and the batteries of the van. Um, and he also, he takes out his school issued Oasis console. And we find out in the next chapter why it's a school issued one. But he's there in his hideout. I want to read one more thing here because it talks about food. Um, let's see if I can find this here. He says, I opened the rat-proof metal box where I kept my food cache and took out some bottled water and a packet of powdered milk. I mixed these together in a bowl and then dumped in a generous serving of Fruit Rock cereal. Once I'd wolfed it down, I retrieved an old plastic Star Trek lunchbox I kept hidden under the van's crushed dashboard. Inside were my school-issued Oasis console, haptic gloves, and visor. These were by far the most valuable things I owned, far too valuable to carry around with me. Um, and then it talks about him logging in to the Oasis, and the entire world is it says identity verification successful. Welcome to the Oasis, Parzival, and we find out it's Parzival. So people refer to him as Z throughout this book. It's because there's a Z in Parzival. Login completed 075321 OST February 10th, 2045. And OST stands for Oasis Standard Time. Um, and we find out that later on in the book, the entire world is basically now Oasis Standard Time, which we find out is pretty much set by Columbus, Ohio, which is still, I believe, in the East Coast, in the Eastern Time Zone. I believe it is. Um, so basically, the entire world is now on one generalized time zone, and that's Oasis time. So the time that it is in the video game is the time that it is in the real world. And then it says, I'll read the last bit here. As the text faded away, it was replaced by a short message, just 3 words long. This message had been embedded into the login sequence by James Halliday himself when he'd first programmed the Oasis, as an homage to the simulation's direct ancestors, the coin-operated video games of his youth. These 3 words were always the last thing an Oasis user saw before leaving the real world and entering the virtual one. Ready Player One. And that's our first chapter. Um, Let me see. I don't think we got any comments this time on this. Let me check. So, nope, no comments. So, hopefully, we'll get some comments from this episode. We've spent about 24 minutes here discussing this first opening chapter, and it's only going to get deeper and better from here. Um, I will. Let's read up through chapter 2. And we'll discuss it. And I'll again either I'm going to try to shoot for Tuesday or Wednesday releases with these. Um, but yeah, read up through chapter 2. Let me know what you think so far in the comments of this video. I will read your comments in the next video, and we'll see you down the road.